Well, hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's great to be with you on this Tuesday, February 15th. And tonight we're talking about accountability.
Today marks an inflection point when our duty of care to our children as a society finally supersedes the bottom line of an industry that made such an atrocity as Sandy Hook possible.
The victims' families from the Sandy Hook school shooting have reached a massive settlement against the gun manufacturer. The head of a group formed after the shooting joins us live. President Biden addressed the nation today explaining America's interests in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We'll dig into what he said. Plus, hackers are targeting cryptocurrency investors around the country, draining their accounts. You might be surprised how easy it is to be duped. And the Southwest is facing its worst drought in more than a millennium. Our series Meet the Mayor continues in Santa Fe, a city finding ways to face climate change. It has been more than 9 years since the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. Today, the families of 9 victims announced a settlement with the maker of the rifle used in that attack. They reached a deal worth $73 million with Remington and its 4 insurers. Remington filed for bankruptcy in 2018 and 2020. The agreement lets these families release documents they obtained during their lawsuit. And those documents apparently detail how Remington marketed the weapon used in the mass shooting. This, what you're looking at now, is a version of the Bushmaster AR-15 style rifle. The lawsuit claimed that Remington's marketing and product placement targeted younger and at-risk males. Now, the case focused on a loophole in federal law called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. It protects gun manufacturers from wrongful death lawsuits, but this suit successfully used the marketing approach. Connecticut's Attorney General William Tong says the families show that the gun industry is not above the law. His statement read in part, quote, "Today's settlement is a clear indication that the PLCAA is not the impenetrable shield that the gun industry wishes it to be, and that gun manufacturers who violate state consumer protection laws can and should be held accountable," unquote. Today, the family members and their attorneys held a news conference in Trumbull, a few miles south of Newtown.
These families, they would pay everything. They'd give it all back just for 1 minute.
True justice would be our 15-year-old healthy and standing next to us right now. But Benny will never be 15. He will be 6 forever, because he is gone forever.
Nothing will bring Dylan back. The closest I get to him now is by kissing his urn every night, telling him I love him and I miss him. But I made him a promise, and I'll keep working to deliver that promise for the rest of my life.
Never tell you I thought I'd see this day. And it's not going to bring Mary back. It's not going to bring any of these kids back. But the cost of business is going to go up substantially.
Today is a day of accountability for an industry that has thus far enjoyed operating with immunity and impunity. And for this, I am grateful.
NBC News reached out to the Firearm Industry Trade Association for their reaction. In a statement, a spokesperson wrote that the settlement, quote, "does not alter the fundamental facts of the case. The plaintiffs never produced any evidence that Bushmaster Advertising had any bearing or influence over Nancy Lanza's decision to legally purchase a Bushmaster rifle, nor on the decision of murderer Adam Lanza to steal that rifle, kill his mother in her sleep, and go on to commit the rest of his horrendous crimes." It goes on to read, quote, "We remain confident ROC," that's the Remington Outdoor Company, "would have prevailed if this case proceeded to trial," unquote. Joining us now is Poe Murray. She's the chair of Newtown Action Alliance, an advocacy group formed after the Sandy Hook shooting. Ms. Murray, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Joshua.
What's your reaction to the settlement?
Well, first, my heart is with those families. Many of them are my neighbors. My neighbor was the shooter who killed 20 children and 6 educators, and our entire community has been impacted by the shooting tragedy over 9 years ago. So those families are very close to my heart, and I really appreciate the fact that they went after the gun industry. The gun manufacturer Remington was, completely irresponsible marketing guns to young people, which helped to arm this mentally ill young person to commit this crime. It is remarkable that the insurers settled with the family. We appreciate that because there are so many other survivors in this nation who would like a similar day in court. And we are hoping that we can break through PLACA. And also, we're hoping that Congress will repeal PLACA to give the survivors their day in court.
Can you talk about what it's been like in your community in the last, let's say, few days and weeks? I mean, I'm sure the community changed dramatically after the shooting, obviously, but were people in town talking about this? Were they happy about it? Were they relieved? What's the mood been like today?
Well, we're very happy that there was a settlement and that the family is receiving some justice. But like they said, they will never get their children back or their loved ones back. So it's still a sad day for us because of that constant reminder that those children, the 6-year-olds and the educators, will never be returned to their families. So this is just a small bit of justice, but we're hopeful that this will be a breakthrough for other survivors all across the nation, so that they too can get their day in court and seek some justice for their loved ones. The gun industry has acted very irresponsibly for all these years due to PLACA, thinking that they have this broad legal immunity forever. But we are thankful that Connecticut has the consumer protection laws, and we're hoping that other states will pass similar laws. And we're also hoping that Congress will repeal PLACA. Senator Blumenthal and Congressman Adam Schiff from California, they have a bill that can repeal this PLACA right away.
I wonder how you view the role of these assault-style weapons today, particularly kind of our cultural relationship with them. I mean, it's kind of hard to turn to any corner of pop culture where guns of this ilk do not exist or where they're not visible. I mean, whether you're watching movies or playing Call of Duty or playing Halo, there are guns of that shape in the culture. And today we heard from the brother of a Sandy Hook shooting victim who talked about how, in his view, the gun industry has tried to remake the image of AR-15 style rifles. Here's part of what he said. Watch.
When things were not going well, the industry tried to rebrand the name that was associated with the slaughter of countless Americans by changing it from the AR-15 to the modern sporting rifle, a slap in the face to all victims who have been previously killed with the same exact weapon.
Ms. Murray, how do we pinpoint the impact of these weapons in our culture and what to do about gun violence as it relates to how we view these kinds of weapons?
That's right. Well, when the sale of hunting rifles went down decades ago, the gun industry decided that they needed to sell these weapons of war to civilians. And since then, we've seen the impact of that. Those guns are not modern sporting rifles. AR-15s are killing machines. And recently, as your photo suggests there, We1 Tactical is marketing AR-15s that are made for children called JR-15s. And the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is a gun lobby group, which is headquartered right in Newtown, 3 miles from the Sandy Hook Elementary School, they allowed this irresponsible gun maker to showcase the JR-15s at their industry SHOT Show last month. It is completely grotesque, and it is irresponsible to continue to market guns, particularly to children.
Before I have to let you go, I know that some states have been filing their own gun control measures. Michigan's Attorney General supports a measure that would provide some criminal penalties if someone is killed or injured by a gun that's not properly stored. I wonder what your organization is working on now, in the time we have left, what your organization's working on now that you'd like to see happen next. President Biden was the target of protests yesterday at the White House on the 4th anniversary of the shooting in Parkland, Florida. What's tops on your list of what you'd like to see happen right now?
Sure. So we support a comprehensive measure to end the gun violence crisis. On the congressional level, we're pushing for HR 748. It's also called Ethan's Law. It would require all gun owners to lock up their guns when children are around. And this became a priority for us, particularly after the Oxford High School shooting, when the 15-year-old was able to use an unsecured gun to kill other students. Then on the White House administration, we've been pushing Joe Biden to establish an Office of Gun Violence Prevention and appoint a director who would spend 100% of his or her time on ending the gun violence crisis in our nation. Last year, 45,000 Americans were killed by guns, and the year before that as well. And when I first joined the movement after the Sandy Hook shooting, there were 33,000 gun deaths a year. So gun deaths are escalating, gun sales are escalating, and we need to make sure that the White House administration and Congress make gun violence prevention a top priority, for this nation.
Paul Murray with the Newtown Action Alliance. I appreciate you making time for us tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joshua.
There are developments in the shooting investigation around Alec Baldwin's movie Rust. You may remember that film was in production near Santa Fe, New Mexico. Santa Fe's mayor joins us live as part of our series, Meet the Mayor. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Parts of the northern U.S. have gotten plenty of snow this winter, and man, has it been cold. Meanwhile, the Southwest is eager for rain, and it's easy to see why. A new report shows that America's Southwest is dealing with its driest stretch in 1,200 years. And data from the federal government bear this out. A department inside NOAA lists Santa Fe, New Mexico as being in severe drought. That means irrigated crops are stunted, wildfires could increase in magnitude and frequency, and fuel-saving practices are in effect. Climate change is just one of the many issues facing Santa Fe and its mayor, Alan Weber. He was reelected to his second term last year, and he joins us now for our occasional series, Meet the Mayor. Mayor Weber, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Joshua.
So paint me a picture of climate change in Santa Fe. Are there places around town where if you live there long enough, you'd be able to notice that things are changing over the years?
Well, things are actually changing for the better over the years because we take climate change, sustainability, and water policy very seriously. In 1995, the city took over the water company. Since then, our population has increased by 25%. Our water use has gone down by 33%. We are very seriously committed to sustainability. About 40% of the drought, we're told, is directly a function of man-made climate change issues. We've got our own local version of the Green New Deal. We've been very, very vigorous in producing 4 alternative water sources. And we have another one we're working on right now, a return flow pipeline, because we really need to continue to look into the future, 40, 80 years worth of planning around our water future. So we're on it. We take it very seriously. We are a gold LEED city, not building, but a city, LEED gold certified. So sustainability has been a way of life in New Mexico and in Santa Fe for more than generations, more than 1,200 years since the Pueblo natives were here. Living with nature, living within the bounds of nature is a way of life in New Mexico, and Santa Fe is a global leader on that front.
You've outlined a number of goals for this term, including diversifying the city's economy. Talk about some of the things that you hope to get Santa Fe more diversified into?
Sure. Great question. Thank you. Something I care deeply about. It's something that our community is committed to. We're an amazing tourist city. Everybody knows that. And we have been ranked consistently as one of the most prolific and desirable art markets for people to come and produce art here or buy art here. At the same time, the world is changing, and every industry is a tech industry. So we're moving in that direction as well, with a lot of locally grown, talented people starting tech businesses, scaling them. You may have heard of Meow Wolf. It's now the 21st century version of Disney, right? You know about that.
I'm very eager to see Meow Wolf's installation. They are a very interesting group, yeah.
And you should come on out. We'll take good care of you, and we'll get you hooked up with the Meow Wolf folks. But it's more than Meow Wolf. We're about to become the headquarters of a cryptocurrency business. We've got a lot of very interesting tech spin-outs of the Los Alamos National Lab. So a lot of work is being done to go beyond tourism. We also, I know you want to get to at some point talking about the film industry in Santa Fe and New Mexico. Our studios are booked up for years to come because all entertainment is digital entertainment. New Mexico and Santa Fe are among the best places in the country to make films, TV shows, and digital entertainment. So we are diversifying. At the same time, we want to keep our quality of life and maintain our track record as a historically significant and culturally important place for people to live and make a living.
I do want to ask you about, very briefly, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the latest with the investigation related to the movie Rust. Today, Helena Hutchins' family sued Alec Baldwin for wrongful death. A few weeks ago, Santa Fe was listed as the #3 city to live and work as a movie maker by Movie Maker magazine. What is your sense, very briefly before I got to let you go, of how to maintain Santa Fe's reputation as a good place and a safe place to make movies? Briefly.
Yeah, anytime there's an injury or a death on a movie set, it's a tragedy, and that's the first issue, and it's being looked at and investigated as to what the cause of this accident was. In the meantime, movie making, digital entertainment is alive and well in Santa Fe. The studios we have are booked up for literally years to come, and we just will do everything we can to work with the industry to make all of the productions safe for all of the people who work on them and participate in them. That particular incident is a total tragedy, and people are investigating how it could have happened and how to make sure it never happens again, including a bill at our state legislature to tighten up on-set practices when there's a fire on.
Mayor Alan Weber of Santa Fe, I appreciate you making a little time for us tonight, sir. Thank you very much.
Let me know when you're coming out for a visit. We'll get you over to Meow Wolf. We'll get you some great food.
Yes, I'm very eager to. I'm very eager to come see him. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
We will update you on the situation in Ukraine when we come back. Vladimir Putin claims to be stepping back from another invasion, but the U.S. says anything is still possible.
But if Russia attacks Ukraine, it would be a war of choice or a war without cause or reason.
The Pentagon, the State Department, and the White House are all making it clear Russia invading Ukraine again is still very possible. Today, President Biden addressed the nation on the issue. Clearly, he wanted Russia to hear him, too.
We are ready to respond decisively to Russian attack on Ukraine, which is still very much a possibility. An invasion remains distinctly possible. That's why I've asked several times that all Americans in Ukraine leave now before it's too late to leave safely. To be clear, if Russia decides to invade, that would also have consequences here at home. But the American people understand that defending democracy and liberty is never without cost.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin also held a press conference today in Moscow. He stated that Russia has no plans to invade Ukraine and that some Russian troops near the Ukrainian border will withdraw. Mr. Putin added that he's ready for more diplomacy with the West. President Biden said that there has been no indication of any troop withdrawal so far. Let's discuss all this with Evelyn Farkas. She served in the Obama administration as its Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. She's also a former senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Ms. Farkas, welcome.
Thanks so much, Joshua.
What did you make of the president's comments today?
Well, first, I thought it was fantastic that he was going out and publicly explaining what's been going on to the American people, because, you know, most Americans aren't paying attention to what Vladimir Putin's doing or what's happening in Europe and don't understand why they should care. And second, he had a very smart message to the Russian people. And, you know, even though, of course, Russian television is controlled by the Russian government, there's an increasing number of Russians who get some news from the internet. And so they would have seen the president's speech. And he's clearly saying to any Russians listening, now hopefully it needs to be translated or may not need to be translated. But in any event, he's saying that we're not looking for a war with the Russian people and even with Russia itself, although he clearly stated that right now the Russian state is threatening the international community and, of course, Ukraine.
You can see there the news conference between Vladimir Putin and Olaf Scholz, who's the Chancellor of Germany. What impact do you think that this remark from President Biden might have on Vladimir Putin's strategy going forward, if any?
Well, again, I think if some Russian people heard it, it could have an impact. What's most important, though, Joshua, is what the people around him, these hardcore most of them with security backgrounds, these advisors in the Kremlin, what they are hearing and thinking. Because at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin's only going to take their counsel. He's not going to care what the people think. He's not going to care about the cost to his men and women in military arms. He's only going to listen to the counsel of the people around him. And if they are spooked, and they could well be spooked, listening to our president, seeing the resolve in America, seeing the resolve and the unity that we are demonstrating with our allies in Europe and elsewhere, seeing the fact that the Ukrainian people have stood up and their morale is strong, their president is not wavering. He's going probably to the most dangerous place tomorrow on the coast of Ukraine, of right near Crimea, and right near the Donetsk area, which may be a target militarily for Vladimir Putin. So seeing all of that, his advisors might turn around and say, you know what, maybe we should, you know, reconsider and not use military force.
With regard to what the U.S. does now, there was a bipartisan Senate statement about this today. It reads in part, quote, "We're prepared to fully support the immediate imposition of strong, robust, and effective sanctions on Russia, as well as tough restrictions and controls on exports to Russia, and we will urge our allies and partners in Europe and around the world to join us," unquote. We should also note that there is a Republican sanctions bill that came out today. Some Republican lawmakers put forth a statement basically arguing that the administration is not doing enough to act on Russia quickly, if at all. What do you make of, A, the prospect of sanctions, and B, the politics around getting sanctions on Russia?
Well, apparently they were not, even though there was a bipartisan sanctions bill, there is a bipartisan sanctions bill in the Senate. It doesn't look like it's going to be able to get to the floor, so they're not likely to pass it. I guess some of the Republicans decided, well, then in that case, we're going to go forward with our own version, which is at least rhetorically stronger, though I'm guessing it's not that different from the bipartisan version. But what it tells you, and again, this is part of, I think, what Putin and his advisors should be looking at closely, is that we have unity in the United States, a country where we can't even agree, you know, whether someone tried to overturn, meaning the previous president, tried to overturn our elections last year. Nevertheless, these people who cannot agree on fundamentally important things like that agree that Russia is the aggressor in this instance and that sanctions should be applied to Russia even if Russia doesn't invade or further invade Ukraine or doesn't launch another operation against Ukraine. So I think that is the significance here.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin is really persuadable? I mean, he said today that he is open to talks, but what do you think of that, really?
Well, I mean, I think I'm with President Biden, who is more or less, without using these words, said, watch what they do, not what they say. And so what they did today was continue to escalate militarily, and they did not de-escalate militarily. Yes, President Putin made some noises, made some nice comments about potential diplomacy. I'm not incredibly hopeful. I watch what they do in Russia. Having said that, the reality is I do remember when I was in the government in 2014, 2015, when the Russians were making advances militarily in Ukraine, they held a meeting at the presidential level, and then they stopped. So it is possible that the presidential advisors could say to Vladimir Putin, listen, Mr. President, this is going to get really hairy for us economically. We're going to see a lot of body bags. We're seeing so much resolve in the West and even the G7, which includes Japan and others. Other countries besides the G7 also are rallying to our side on this effort. And maybe more countries will say, look, what Russia's doing is international bullying. It's breaking the law, and we'll have a really global campaign. So at the end of the day, it's not entirely impossible that Vladimir Putin would be affected by those arguments, but we really don't know what he's going to decide.
So lots of us have gotten into conversations about COVID that didn't go well. One of the top bosses at Levi Strauss claims her views on COVID policies cost her that job. Jennifer Say had been with Levi's for more than 20 years. She claims that the company had always had her back. But when the pandemic hit, Ms. Say started speaking out, including in TV interviews and op-eds. At times, she also spread misinformation. Last February, she falsely wrote, quote, "The ongoing refusal of major cities in America to open schools is not only not backed by science, but is nothing short of child abuse," unquote. She added, quote, "Kids are at statistically zero risk of becoming ill from COVID-19 and are also far less likely to spread it to adults," unquote. That is clearly not true. According to the CDC, as of last week, COVID has killed more than 900 minors. Nearly 300 of them were 4 years old or younger. In an article published yesterday, Jennifer Say claimed that Levi Strauss urged her to just stop talking about all this. Apparently, its CEO told her that her position at the company was, quote, untenable. Ms. Say claims that she turned down a $1 million severance package. That deal would have included a non-disclosure agreement requiring her not to talk about all this. Her last day at Levi's was Sunday. NBC News reached out to the company for a response. It did not address her account of why she left, but it confirmed her resignation. The company says that Executive Vice President Seth Ellison will become brand president. So how should we conduct ourselves on the job when it comes to COVID conversations? How much policing is acceptable? Let's discuss it with NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Joshua.
So what do you make of this whole take on the Levi's situation?
All right, so I'm going to take it in kind of three levels. On the surface, it's very troubling, especially I did read her Substack newsletter, and I had kind of followed slowly along the month. She's been very vocal, by the way, before the pandemic, very vocal on gay rights, on reproductive rights. And I think things that would have really catapulted her as a feminist, an icon in a way, and so much of career accomplishment. But the layer of the onion that gets complicated is this sense of censorship that, she moved her family from San Francisco to Denver to have them in person in school. And she talks about, as you mentioned, kind of the abuse that children have received. Now, I think that when there's a perception that speaking out and kind of speaking your feelings and opinions somehow becomes a problem for a job for which you've been successful, competently suited for, that's when that's when all of us have a problem. And I would say that she's probably unique. Not everybody can get a podium on, Fox, Laura Ingraham's show, getting a Forbes article written about you. But honestly, Joshua, there are probably a lot more people that feel like her that don't have those platforms. So then what's underneath that is we're all trying to just be normal in the workplace, right? We want to be back to in-person work. We want conversations. But what do you do when the water cooler conversation is about how frustrated you are about math, about how you're angry that your company might have a vaccine requirement? How do you then engage in just civil discourse? And I think that's really what's at the heart of this.
Yeah, with regards to that, I wonder, because we've heard from a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions about COVID. We've been trying to hear from people with facts about COVID. And I think that responsibility has been a key theme of this pandemic. I mean, if you are a brand manager for one of the world's most iconic brands, you're not an everyday person. You have a different level of responsibility. I can say certain things and I can't say certain things because I have chosen to work for NBC News. This job confers immense power and enormous responsibility. And I don't have to accept that, but if I take the job, I got to sign every piece of the policy on the dotted line and either engage with my bosses when I have a problem or suck it up, because I picked the path that I'm on. And I'm not sure how we work through that when it comes to COVID. Everybody wants to have their say about COVID, but the responsibility is the piece where I think some people bail out.
Yeah, and I do think that this is uncharted territory, right? I mean, there's standards that all of us look. I have an obligation to treat anyone who comes to me for help. Now, that gets muddled when you've heard, Joshua, we've even talked about how there are some health professionals that don't want to take care of unvaccinated individuals. I do not agree with that, but that's my decision. And I also feel like I'm ethically bound to that. But you're right, it gets very muddled. I think kind of drawing back for a second, because like you said, not many people are going to be in her position. And I do feel that she took an opportunity to, have a platform. And maybe at the end of the day, she could have had more impact if she became the CEO of Levi's and created a work environment where you could have these discussions. That's what I would have loved to have seen, not knowing her personally, not knowing the circumstances in detail. That would have been far more impactful than kind of this 15 minutes, because what's going to happen? There are probably a lot more employees that agree with her, Joshua, but when they see what happened, they immediately assume that this is now not accessible for them.
I do want to play a little piece of a conversation she had on the Megyn Kelly show. She came for an interview to speak with Megyn Kelly. Here's part of what Jennifer Say said. Listen.
It didn't matter what the cost to me was, and it became clear that there was a high likelihood I would lose my job. I certainly for a year have been very nervous about getting fired.
I do wonder, Dr. Patel, on the flip side of this, with regard to her being nervous for a year, if maybe Levi's bears a little responsibility for this. I mean, if you don't want executives to have these kinds of conversations, that's got to be spelled out clear up front. I know exactly what the NBC News policies are governing my job. I know them in black and white because I signed them. I wonder if maybe that's part of the lesson here in terms of like what corporate expectations are.
Yeah, and so this gets back to, look, companies of all sizes, Joshua, are trying to navigate this. Not necessarily this exact example, but the kind of conversation around corporate responsibility, corporate governance. And what I would say is exactly what you said. I've told companies of all sizes, be very clear about what workplace etiquette means. Don't just assume that it means that, if we have a vaccine requirement at our workplace or a mask requirement, that everybody just agrees with it without understanding, and that you don't leave room for disagreement. Or what does that room look like? How do you have those conversations? And if there's one thing I can tell you, even amongst health professionals, Joshua, all you have to do is look on social media. We're all disagreeing with each other because there's facts and then there's opinions, and we all have both of them. And I think that's the number one lesson coming out of this for me, of her example, but many others. Look at what happens look at Tesla. Look at any company where you're starting to see employees that say, wait a minute, there's been, we have had our criticisms denied. We have had our voices squandered. That is in and of itself such a big problem. And COVID has brought a lot more of that to the surface. So being explicit about policy is one step. And then the second step is for managers, I think, to really, you need a lot more emotional intelligence in 2022 than you probably ever did to kind of understand where people are. And there is no one place that people are, and it's not static, it's dynamic.
I do want to note, by the way, I'm sorry that you and I don't have time to talk about this, but I do want to note some of our reporting out of Washington that the CDC is expected to loosen its indoor masking guidelines to states soon, according to a number of people who've spoken to NBC News about this. We're expecting a briefing tomorrow from Dr. Rochelle Walensky at a White House COVID-19 response team briefing. Nothing's finalized yet. Hopefully we'll learn more about this tomorrow when we hear from the CDC. But again, our new reporting tonight that we're expecting the CDC to loosen some of its guidelines for states about indoor masking. We'll have more of that on this network tomorrow. For now, Dr. Kavita Patel, I appreciate talking to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you watch the Super Bowl, you may have noticed a lot of commercials for cryptocurrency services. Those ads are on the rise, and so are the scams. How to protect yourself and your money. Before we go, as if we did not get enough of those annoying robocalls. Now, scammers around the country are targeting cryptocurrency accounts. A CNBC investigation unravels a nightmare that started with a phone call. CNBC senior Washington correspondent Eamon Javers has that story.
Dr. Anders Apgar and his wife were out to dinner in January with their children, and his phone just wouldn't stop buzzing. The voice message was alarming.
Hello. Welcome to Coinbase Security Prevention Line. We have detected unauthorized activity.
That caught his attention since he and his wife, who are both obstetricians, had more than $100,000 in Bitcoin invested through Coinbase, the country's largest crypto platform. Apgar had a bad feeling as soon as he answered.
Something in the back of your head said didn't quite feel right.
Correct. And it
but
didn't
it was
feel
just
perfect.
convincing enough.
For an instant, he was convinced it was real.
We have detected unauthorized activity due failed login attempt in your account. This was requested from an Canada IP address. If this not you, please press 1.
That says to secure your account, hit 1.
Yeah.
So I hit 1.
Yeah.
And as I hit 1, the two-factor authentication came through, and I saw a text come through. And this is where, honestly, it gets hazy, almost like when people say they were in a car accident, and I can't remember the details of what happened. And I looked at my wife and I said, something is wrong. And I said, let's try and get into it. I said, let's get to the account. And so when we opened the Coinbase app, we could no longer get into the account.
How long was it from the time that two-factor authentication came in to the time that you checked the account?
Maybe less than 2.
Less than 2 minutes. Yeah. So you tap something on your phone, and 2 minutes later, you're out of your account.
Gone.
And the money was gone.
Absolutely gone. I have no idea at this point. The access to the money was gone.
The account was completely locked. The culprit was apparently part of an increasing trend, a one-time password bot programmed to trick you into thinking your account's getting hacked, but in reality, it's stealing your two-factor or 2FA authentication code. Jessica Kelly is an analyst at cybersecurity firm Q6, which is a CNBC contributor, and authored a report about how these bots work.
That information gets sent to the bot, which then automatically sends it to the cyber criminal, which then has access to the victim's account, which is the exact opposite of what the victim thinks in that moment.
Fraudsters openly sell the bots on Telegram, targeting not only Coinbase, but also other platforms, banks, social media accounts, anywhere you use two-factor authentication.
Thank you for calling Coinbase. This is Sean. How can I help you today?
Sometimes the calls aren't bots, they're real people. On this call is someone impersonating a Coinbase employee. On the other end of the line is Coinbase customer David Silver.
Immediately, it was an electronic voice that told me it was Coinbase fraud department. And I immediately turned to the lawyer sitting next to me and said, start videoing. I knew instantaneously what this was and what it was going to be.
They called the wrong guy. Silver is not only a Coinbase customer, but an attorney who happens to specialize in cryptocurrency fraud.
You are not going to give any access to any individual or human being, okay? You are going to get connected with our server.
Silver was astounded at how much information the fraudster already had.
They had a phone number for me to call back on. The second thing they said to me was, we can't send you an email because your personal email is already compromised, which obviously I knew was not true.
After nearly 7 minutes,
great, thank you very much,
Silver ended the call. That's what Anders Apgar wishes he had done, just hang up. Instead, he says, the ordeal was like watching a theft in progress.
It would be as though we had cameras at the house and we couldn't go home and we could watch people just taking stuff out of our house.
That was CNBC's Eamon Javers reporting. Now, Coinbase tells us that it never makes unsolicited calls to its customers. It cautions against disclosing personal information to anyone over the phone before checking. As far as Dr. Apgar, he says he still can't get into his account because the fraudsters changed his email. Coinbase tells us it's turned the matter over to its security team, which is working to restore access. Now, the hype around crypto is not just about big money, it's also about privacy. Tracing transactions between users is not impossible, but it can be extremely hard. Consider those protesters, the ones who blocked the biggest trade routes between the U.S. and Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked emergency powers to break up those blockades. His plan takes aim at the finances of the protesters, including crypto. Canadian leaders say outside financial support helped fund these protests. They used crowdfunding and digital currencies to keep up the blockades. Canada's Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, spelled out the new plan.
We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use. These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies. We are making these changes because we know that these platforms are being used to support illegal blockades and illegal activity, which is damaging the Canadian economy.
So Canada is essentially requiring payment processors to tell the government when they potentially transfer money to blockade protesters. And that could chip away at some of the privacy crypto users enjoy. Let's bring in Ken Arad, co-founder and chief operating officer of Solidus Labs. That's a crypto risk monitoring and market surveillance firm. Mr. Arad, welcome.
Thank you so much, Joshua. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you inviting me to the show.
Let me start with your thoughts on the measures that Canada is taking to try to crack down on the protest. So it seems like governments and law enforcement agencies have slowly gotten a little more savvy about how to inject some kind of regulation or enforcement within the cryptocurrency environment.
100%, Joshua. I mean, just last week, we had the Department of Justice here in the U.S., announce the largest seizure ever of stolen funds. It was around 3.6 billion recovered Bitcoin, despite, what they described as a flurry of transactions to try and launder it, which really speaks to one of the biggest misconceptions around crypto. There are a lot of risks associated with crypto. I'm sure we'll touch them, but it's not some untraceable, anonymous, criminal dream, as it often gets portrayed. In fact, it is absolutely possible to, retrieve and trace those funds. To your question about, the Canadian action, at the end of the day, crypto is not the story here, right? I mean, there's a government that's interested in preventing the funding of a specific activity without going into the politics and, for or against. In this case, it extended some of its authority to have more ability to limit financial transactions in general that are affiliated with this activity, in this case, the track protests. And crypto is one of those channels. Now, what's also interesting is that it also speaks to one of the most interesting merits of crypto, right? What happened is that the supporters of the protest raised around $20 million using traditional crowdfunding platforms, ones that are owned by specific companies. When those were frozen, they tried to turn to Bitcoin, which is decentralized, and therefore there's no entity that could freeze it. But going back to my original point, that does not mean that it's untraceable and unreachable by governments, as you mentioned.
What do you make of the CNBC investigation? I have to admit, one of the things that kind of gets me about the way online scams work is just they play on people's ignorance / gullibility about how digital systems work now. And this is not a dumb guy, right, that Eamon Javers talked to, but I think it's easy in an environment, an ecosystem that's just growing and changing so fast to not know how to protect yourself from scammers.
I mean, look, my first reaction, of course, is, it just saddens me and it angers me. Look, I mean, we all get, I can't even count the amount of calls I get a week or a day that, are either spam and oftentimes are very similar in nature to what the article described. It saddens me just because it just hurts to see people getting hurt, specifically as someone who understands, who really believes in the merits of crypto, in the ability of crypto to do good by providing more accessibility to financial services and really transforming an industry that can use a transformation. It just saddens me that because crypto is new, it's also in that way a fertile ground for malicious actors. It's not just the fact that it's new, that it's a new asset class, in financial services that are, rooted in new technology that is still being battle tested. It's also the fact that regulation is still evolving, which is also natural for a new industry, not just here. And as you mentioned, the huge amount of buzz and FOMO around it. I believe you touched on the Super Bowl ads. There's a huge excitement in the crypto space to share this, to share, the opportunity here with the rest of the world. There are real opportunities here for, regular people to make their money work for them, but low regulation, new technologies, and a lot of FOMO that causes people to sometimes make, quick decisions is a fertile ground for manipulators. And I would just caution everyone who's, I would recommend for everyone to engage with crypto, learn more about it, understand the opportunity, but not without focusing on also understanding the different risks. And of course, being particularly careful, from hacks and fraud of this kind when you deal with crypto.
I was just going to ask you in our last few seconds, your one biggest tip in terms of where people should start, like the main thing people need to know before they get into crypto, very briefly, before we go.
Absolutely. Look, I'm optimistic. The crypto industry understands extremely well that these things need to be addressed in order for crypto to manifest its potential. And, one of the ways to do that is really by providing more information and education. I would recommend to anyone engaging in crypto to do due diligence about the platform they're using, see whether they're using advanced risk monitoring, whether they're partnered with companies, like ours that helps protect users, and just do your research, but also don't miss out on this huge opportunity. Just, do it carefully.
Ken Arad, I appreciate you making time for us tonight, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you also for making time for us. Be sure to follow us online for the latest on upcoming topics and guests. We're at NBC Now Tonight on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Leave us a voicemail if you like, or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.